Pedram Shojai back with you again. This week, Angela Hanscom. Very interesting. This is near and dear to my heart. It's about getting the kids out in the dirt, letting the kids play in 3 dimensions, barefoot, out in the garden, out in the woods, wherever they feel comfortable roaming. Why? Because that's where we came from. It seems kind of common sense, but we got to unpack this. Check out this episode. I know you're going to enjoy it. And let me know what you think on the chat threads, wherever you're getting this. So you see kids professionally, and as an occupational therapist for pediatrics, I know that you've seen all kinds of interesting stuff come. What is happening? What's different between the kids in our generation and past generations?
So I'm seeing a difference in their sensory and motor skills compared to the early 1980s, basically. I'm seeing a lot of children with attention issues, balance, coordination. We're seeing an increase in children being more aggressive on the playground. For instance, playing tag with much more force when they play tag, so that they're almost slapping each other on the back. We're also seeing a decrease in children being able to play by themselves.
That's interesting. And this is all in, it's obviously over a span of time, and we've, kind of seen all sorts of crazy changes. And so you talk about something that I think is just, it's so delightful to talk about, because, all these kids, you go out any given day, any given weekend, and there's millions of kids lined up at like these soccer games and, doing sports and aquatics and whatever. But the one thing I miss seeing is just, screaming kids running around freely kind of wheeling and causing chaos and trouble, which is how, my generation grew up. We get the bumps and bruises to show for it, but you call this thing active free play. Can you let's define that and set the stage, because I want to have fun with that the rest of today.
Right, sure. So active free play is basically being able to move in the way your body was designed to move. Not being restricted for hours on end, by being asked to sit in a chair for hours or being driven from one event to the next. It's really just, spinning in circles, climbing trees, rolling down hills, finding some space somewhere and digging in the dirt. It doesn't really matter. It's just playing and moving in the way that your body was intended to move. And
that's multi-directional, multi-planar movement.
Mm-hmm.
We have the same thing with adults, except we're so busy sitting at office chairs we don't even know the difference. But doing the bench press and doing very, very linear exercise doesn't get us to be functionally fit.
Right.
But you're seeing things in children that are happening at an early stage that are actually affecting their brains, their development, their behavior. Talk to me about it.
Right. So what I'm seeing is that children are being restricted for many hours during the day. So like I said a minute ago, in the school system, they are sitting for a good portion of the day. If you think about how much time they get for recess or movement breaks, it's really just quick 5-minute movement breaks if they're lucky. And then recess sessions are about 20 minutes. But for the most part, they're sitting. And even, they might be driven to school, whereas when we were growing up, a lot of us walked to school or biked to school, but that's no longer the case. And then when they get home, a lot of them have homework for a good portion of the time, so like a good hour and a half, even like in 3rd grade. Whereas, I remember growing up just having maybe a worksheet and then heading out and playing for hours with my friend till it got dark outside. Yep. So that's changed a lot. I recently talked to a group of about 200 people, and I was curious how many people in that audience, how much time did they spend on average when they were growing up during a school day? And the average response was 4 to 5 hours. So, a lot of them were saying, again, that they walked to school. They might have had an hour-long recess session, maybe 2 recess sessions. And then when they got home, they played for hours. Whereas when I asked, how often does your child get to play outdoors? The average response was 45 minutes to an hour and a half. So that's a significant decline in the amount of active play children are getting.
Wow.
where they're moving in all different directions, digging, climbing, engaging their muscles, and their balance system. So that anytime you change the environment, you're going to change child development.
Yeah, so let's talk about that because kids' bodies are doing different things. I mean, they're growing, they're developing, they're basically dealing with motor skills. So early in your book, you talked about gross motor skills versus fine motor skills and how these are impacted by active free play and really how they're negatively impacted by the sedentary lifestyle that we have. So let's unpack that a little bit more, if you will.
Sure. So gross motor skills it can be anything from coordination, basic coordination skills to strength. And those are definitely impacted because if you think about it, if you're not playing for hours on end and moving rocks to build a dam, carrying heavy logs to build a fort, climbing trees and doing all these things, through play, kids will naturally build their muscles and the senses in their joints to figure out where their body is in space. They're not getting as much as that as they used to. And so a lot of children are having trouble doing as many push-ups and sit-ups as years pass. And their balance is not quite where it should be as well. So what we're finding is more and more kids are falling. Teachers are reporting that kids are literally falling out of their seats in school, which is really surprising. And even running into each other, into the walls, which is not something you would think about.
Wow, this is real maladaptive news. It's kind of scary. Yeah, it's kind of scary.
It's
so kids falling out of their chairs, bumping into each other and falling over. That's just, and we go, oh yeah, that's my kid. He's klutzy. But that's actually not their birthright, right? Like, we're pretty highly tuned, adaptive, creatures that have come up in the food chain. And so we're seeing this now, and this is obviously, physiologically, we're getting childhood obesity and all sorts of things that are terrible for kind of long-term longevity and health. You're obviously seeing it kind of in the orthopedic realm where kids are just falling and banging into each other. They don't have the coordination. Brain development is also there, and I know you're more on the OT side of it. But man, I mean behavioral. I was just telling you offline before we got on. It's like I know a clinic that's dealing with kids with learning disorders, ADD, ADHD, all by just getting them to kind of creep and crawl and just get some whole body motion. And so it's like, okay, is my kid really that different and weird and hard to deal with, or is his body just not doing what it's supposed to do? So they're freaking out and acting out.
Yeah. Well, it's all interconnected, actually.
Right.
The mind and the body. It's all the senses are they affect each other. And actually, the balance sense is one of the first senses to develop in the womb. So when you come out, your balance sense is fully functioning. They did research on this to test babies, and their skills of their vestibular sense is fully functioning, unlike auditory. And hearing and vision takes a while to develop. Your balance sense is fully developed when you come out. So what happens is if you restrict children's movement over and over, that's when we're starting to see problems with their balance system.
Interesting. So the vestibular system is also tied to the ear. It's all the kind of, the otoliths and all the stuff that are happening that adults suffer from. But we're talking about actual balance and lining up our eyes with the horizon and all these wonderful things that we're good at and we take for granted. That you're seeing go. What about proprioception?
Yeah, proprioception as well. Again, if you think about kids years past, even mowing the lawn and doing chores and helping out around the house, actually they were getting resistive work, heavy work, which gives nice senses to the joints and muscles, and that develops those senses. So if children are doing less chores and less playing outdoors for hours, they're not going to develop those senses like they used to. And that's your sense that can regulate how much force to use when you're going to write with a pencil without breaking the lead over and over, when you go to crack an egg without smushing the whole thing in your hand, and also when you go to play a game of tag without hurting the other children. So that's part of the reason why we're seeing so many kids have trouble regulating how much force to use when playing tag. So now schools are actually banning tag because they are saying that kids are being too aggressive with it. And teachers are implementing 2-finger touch rules so that they don't hurt each other, or they're banning tag completely.
Yeah, which is kind of a Band-Aid solution to a much bigger problem, it seems, right?
Right.
So,
Yeah.
okay, so how do we get them to play at school? I mean, it seems like school is so restrictive. Everyone's trying not to get sued, right? So it's like, do we just need to carve out time and just let them run around the streets because we're told the streets aren't safe and there's a child molester there, and you can't. Everything's so damn dangerous. It seems that like everyone's shell shocked into like buying a Nintendo or whatever the hell people are doing nowadays. A Sony PS4 and saying, here, just sit there and it's safe. How do we get out of that?
So there's a bunch of techniques depending on where you live. It's kind of a loaded question, but I guess starting with the school, I feel like schools have a lot of potential to allow kids to move more. Right now, they're saying their hands are tied because they have to fit in more curriculum, but really the research is saying movement helps with learning. And in fact, sitting all day is not the best way to learn anyway. So technically, you don't need just recess, but you really need to rethink the school model where children can be moving around the classroom or engaged in hands-on experiences where they're learning through inquiry and exploration, that kind of thing. So it's really just taking a little bit of creativity and some time to step back and allow kids more time to move. For parents, if you live in a neighborhood, sometimes it's just establishing relationships with your neighbors. I feel like we're all so busy and we're all worried about what we need to do at that time that we don't always establish that community that we used to have that really supported children and watched out for the kids. So now we don't trust anyone, and so fear is getting in the way. So we really need to just take time again. All of this takes time, so it's a sacrifice for kids. Getting to know your neighbors and allowing kids to go out, and also being a role model. So if you let your children go and bike to Johnny's house, and calling Johnny's mom to let him know that he's coming, like is also a role model. I've done that with my own children, letting them bike down the street to a friend's house, and they bring little walkie-talkies and they call me when they get there. But then the parents realize, oh, this is really okay. So then they come back. And so it's just a lot of modeling for other people as well.
That's great. There's some charter schools that are doing some really interesting stuff that I think are commendable and for us to keep our eyes on. Waldorf, really kind of endorses this type of outdoor play, and there's a lot of studies showing that getting technologically savvy before the age of 8 means nothing anyways. You're better off being able to climb a tree, and so
they'll learn it anyway.
They'll learn it anyways. They're gonna
Right.
you can't avoid the iPad. So there's all sorts of stuff stacking in that direction. Now the foreword for your book is by Richard Louv, and so for my listeners and viewers who haven't heard of him, he wrote a book called Last Child in the Woods. And he's been kind of a front runner in the conversation about getting kids back into nature. So you love active free play, but you obviously favor playing outdoors. So there's the microbiome, there's the sun, there's all sorts of things that kind of come on the physiological end. Is this because it's multidimensional? Is it because the Earth isn't flat? Like, give me your basis for this.
Right. Well, it's interesting you say that because as an occupational therapist, first of all, I feel like I should mention that we're usually prescribed for treatment for a child when they have troubles with attention and balance and coordination, and when they have sensory issues. So if they don't like their hands to get dirty, if that noises are too loud for them, that kind of thing. And so, but most of the time, occupational therapists are found indoors, which is really ironic because we are known to be sensory experts. And so sensory integration is basically bringing together all the senses and organizing them so that your brain can function at its full potential. If you don't have organization of your senses, you're going to have a really hard time learning. So outdoors is the ultimate sensory experience because you have to be in a calm and alert state in order for sensory integration to happen. So if you think about it, most of our clinics, our outpatient clinics where we treat children, they look sort of like Chuck E. Cheese. They're brightly colored plastic balls. Everything's primary colors like red, yellow, and orange. And so it's and we engineer sensory experiences for them. So it's very, a lot of children will go into the clinic like up here, and they might go a little bit higher where their arousal level goes really high. And so they have a hard time with that. Whereas if you go outdoors, if you think about it, it's very calming. The colors are neutral, the wind's blowing, you hear birds tweeting. It's just a naturally calming environment, but you're also alert because you have to pay attention. We have the uneven ground that you were talking about. There might be an animal that runs across that you have to pay attention to. So it's the ultimate state for sensory integration to happen. And so this is kind of a big deal for occupational therapists because we've always been indoors. So this is kind of a turning point for us to look at the outdoors as a sensory environment for children, ironically.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's, we have a homecoming here, and there's a lot of things that are changing in our time. A good buddy of mine, his kid is up in a forest school. He's a 3-year-old, and literally the entire school is kind of a fenced-in area of a forest where it's like, go have at it, right? And so they have plenty of acreage, they run around, and not only are they being exposed to nature and uneven surfaces and all these wonderful things, but the second half of the title of your book is barefoot. Right? And so, and a lot of these kids run barefoot, and there's earthing, and there's all sorts of theories out there now about why that's good for us. I'd love to hear from you. I mean, from small bones in the feet all the way up to the brain, what that does.
Right. So basically, I like barefoot because you get nice tactile touch input to the feet, but it also develops the arches of the feet, just like the hands. So when babies crawl and they move their hands around, they're developing the arches in the hands to be able to grasp things. Well, your feet need the arches to support good stability and balance. And it also helps to develop your ankle stability. So when shoes, they actually get in the way of development and they support too much. And so you're not getting the natural curvatures of the feet and stuff. So it's pretty important, and it gives you proprioceptive input as well, so you know where your body is in space.
Let's unpack that a little bit more, just because I think the feet they're so far away from like the capital city up here in the cranium that most of us just, let our toenails get fungusy and just, you know what I mean? It's like they're so far, people don't even care. And then there's this whole movement towards orthotics, right? So all these podiatrists are out there giving people orthotic shoes and all that. And it's almost like you've given up on your feet and you need prosthetics to hold you up and prop you up. What's the importance of the feet as kind of the base of the orthopedic system? And so, I really want to unpack this for our audience, because as a child, if you don't develop that, then, there's parts of your brain that are just not going to get it, right?
Right. Yeah, I actually think it helps integrate some of the reflexes too, as well. There's a reflex that integrates when you do massage to the foot that helps prevent toe walking. And so I wonder, how many kids that are toe walking that actually is related to that. So I think there's a lot there, that could be a whole book in itself. And I know there's a huge movement with barefoot shoes. Companies too, because there's a lot of research about the importance of getting that sensory feedback, and that it can also affect different, curvature of the spine and different. You can have different back issues and all that stuff. I'm not totally skilled with it, but I know that it can affect mobility and all that stuff as well.
Yep, absolutely. And just the firing of your hips and all of the kind of
right.
postural muscles that go from bottom up. It's a big right. deal. It's scary when it's not there, and we take it for granted because you and I ran around playing in the fields. Right. Back right. back when that was allowed, right? So
definitely.
What are you seeing in terms of benefits to kids that are actually now kind of getting back into active free play? What's happening? What's the transformation?
Right. There's a lot happening. A couple of the big ones is one that we don't think about often is that a lot of children are used to being entertained now because they're in adult-directed activities a lot. And even organized sports, if you think about it, you're doing drills and you're being told what to do. So when So we run a program called Timbernook that's totally out in the woods, and the whole mission of Timbernook is to get kids to play independently again. And for some of these children, it takes a good week just for them to decompress and to be able to come up with their own ideas. I've had a child come up to me one time and said, what are we doing right now? And I said, it's free play. This is your chance to play. And she was like, what? She goes, my mom is paying you good money to entertain me. And
Wow.
I thought that was really interesting, that, she was 5 or 6. So,
I used to own a summer camp for kids for years, and I didn't know any of this, but it just made sense at the time to really structure in unstructured time. And we'd have the same thing. I mean, you have these rich kids who are coming in, parents are paying for camp, and you're like, what are we doing now? It's like, you're doing it,
right.
like, go. And it took them, some of them it took like days and weeks to finally just be like, oh, I'm gonna go explore, like I'm gonna find an acorn, I'm gonna climb a tree. I'm not allowed to climb the tree. It's like, yes, you are, just tell a counselor. And it was just so amazing to see how far gone these kids were and how shell-shocked they were into thinking nature is dangerous, they can't do anything, they need permission. And it's just like, of course they're acting out, of course they're misbehaving, and of course their grades are being reflected. So I love that, and I love how that's kind of making a comeback very strong, in the movement that you're talking about. So give me some general advice for parents listening to this to just help get their kids untethered.
Right. Well, I think in the beginning, especially for little children, to start playing independently outdoors, sometimes you do have to go out with them so they feel comfortable. But I would say keep yourself busy so that you don't start directing their play, or the child doesn't look to you for ideas constantly. You really want to empower your kids to start playing on their own. So sometimes just going out there and raking or doing yard work is a really great way to just be present, get the kids playing. Then I would really just try to kind of phase myself out and maybe go indoors for a little bit when they're getting older. You really want them to be more independent. Allow them to bike to other people's homes, get to know your neighbors. Sometimes putting objects out there, like they're called loose parts, baskets, shears or see-through curtains that they can play with, that are camouflaged, that kind of stuff are all things that they can build with and create with, can inspire children as well.
That's great. That's great. So if I have a 2-year-old, my 6-month-old can't do crap yet. She's just like on her tummy doing, like doing the lizard walk, right? Yeah. But my 2-year-old, I have him everywhere. And like we go to the park and a lot of the surfaces still are flat, right? They have that like really cushy foam, rubber, whatever the heck it is. I'm sure it causes cancer. Material that's like there so the city doesn't get sued. And so it's cool and it's really kind of safer, but it's still flat, right? So what you're saying is, get their shoes off and get them on the little like hill 20 feet over to the other side and let them kind of develop some dexterity and proprioception.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, they need to challenge their bodies a little bit and get some tactile input, let them touch the dirt, the grass. I have 2 daughters that are older, 7 and 10, and then I've got a new baby. And I was out there with him. He's 8 months old, and he was, touching the dandelions, sticking it in his mouth for a minute and going, ugh. But just, they really experience the world through taste and touch. And just getting used to those textures. A lot of kids aren't given the chance to do that from a really early age. And those are the kids that are going to go and not like glue on their hands and get really grossed out by different textures and then possibly need treatment. We have a lot of kids now that won't even tolerate wearing certain clothes. And so it takes pretty intense treatment to get them to tolerate different textures later.
Wow.
So we want to try to do what we can to prevent that.
Yeah, so don't do any harm. But for whatever harm that's been done, because let's face it, we're busy. We're trying to make money and provide for our families, and sometimes and we didn't know, right? A lot of this is we didn't know how the change in times actually was detrimental to our kids' health. So for someone who maybe has a kid who's 7 or 8 years old and is a little clumsy and seems to have like 2 left feet and all that, again, is it active free play, or are there any sort of like exercises that you would recommend to actually get them to start integrating?
Lots of movement. So those are the kids you want to fight for, to have enough time to move at school, and also when they get home to really just put homework aside and let them play outdoors. Swings are really important because spinning and going upside down or on their belly are all the different types of movement that will get fluid moving back and forth inside the inner ear, which develops your vestibular, your balance system. And that sense really is the key to all the other senses. So that's a really important sense to move. And most kids, when they go for OT now, that's the first sense that we have to treat. So they really need a lot more movement than we're giving them. And I'm talking hours a day. We're so used to hearing 60 minutes is enough, but it's not. That's going to prevent disease, but it's not enough to prevent sensory and motor deficits.
Wow. So what if my kids are at some public school where they have recess on the blacktop and you know, I have a very limited scope. So is it basically like 2-finger tag and, you know, get what you can type of thing?
I think knowledge is key to change, and so sometimes just talking to the teachers about it. Obviously, it might be hard for them to do something about if they have a blacktop and that's all they have, but then to counteract that with what do they have at home? Do I have to take time to bring them somewhere? You know, let them, you know, I also think educating the school about, you know, the importance of doing different types of movement are really key. Like, for instance, our local school won't allow kids to spin in circles because they feel like it's dangerous, but that actually helps give you your sense of body awareness. And we use that for treatment, or going upside down. You know, so allowing kids that freedom of movement, even if they're on a blacktop, is going to be really important. And then dance is really a really meaningful movement-based therapy that people can do as well, and teachers and parents at home, which really works on the core and also on getting in all different planes.
Got it. Excellent. So move around like your ancestors would have. Get out in the dirt, get your shoes off if you can, and do it as early as you can, because the sooner you do it, the sooner they start developing those skills.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. And even with babies, like get them out of those baby devices, and even carrying them around in different positions is important.
And then putting them on the floor as much as you can, right? Let them develop all that core strength and really, you know, eventually from creeping to crawling to getting up. And, you know, it's funny, you watch, you know, some of these like Olympic lifters that I've talked to, you know, it's like you watch a baby do a squat. Like you watch my 2-year-old, he's got this perfect squat, you know, like squats right down, picks up a toy, stands right back up. And I'm like, my back would hurt, right? And it's just like, that is perfect biomechanics. At what point do we lose it? And I think, you know, I think the answer is the stupid school chair, right? Like the desk.
Right.
And so, we got a lot of rethinking to do here. And so,
we do, definitely.
Angela, this is great. As a parent, this is very encouraging. I love that you're doing this work. The book is called Balanced and Barefoot. How do you pronounce your last name? Hanscom?
Hanscom.
Hanscom. So Angela Hanscom, here's the book. I'll put it up here. How can people get a hold of you and get a hold of the book and just kind of get more of this information?
So you can go to timbernook.com, which is timber like a falling tree, and then nook, and then ok.com, and then all my information is right there.
And double OK or N-N-OK?
Yep, 2 O's.
2 O's, okay, yes. So just want to make sure.
Yeah. So, and then we have a Facebook page that I share a lot of research and articles that will back up what, you know, parents are looking for. We actually have an article on there about the case for free play during recess as well, that parents can bring to superintendents for help to kind of educate their school about this.
I love it. I love it. This is part of a grassroots revolution from concerned parents. You know, powered by smart scientists to say, hey, look, enough is enough. Let's go get this, and you know, get our kids back to where they should be. So, listen, I honor you. It's great work that you're doing. Keep it up. And you know, if you're listening to this and you've got kids, this is important. This is their future we're talking about, and it has a lot to do with moving around, multi-directional, multi-planar, getting their balance, getting all their coordination, and frankly, just having some freaking fun, right?
Yeah.
It's just we're penned in, man. Like it's, you know, I remember free play. I still do it. It's great, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for being here. Keep up the good work, and
Thank you.
yeah, hope to see your work around everywhere.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Good stuff. I love getting in the dirt. My kids are out in the dirt all the time now. There's never enough time with nature in an urban lifestyle. So really think about how you're going to be able to do this for your kids, for yourself, for your grandchildren, even for your pets. It's important. Check out over here to my left videos from before. Subscribe here below me if you're listening. Find a way to subscribe. I'm going to keep them coming your way. I will see you next time.